Please welcome the Managing Director at R3.0, Ralf Thurm, from the Netherlands.
Good morning. Nice to see so many people in the room, and for many of you it's also a welcome back. For me as well. As you've heard, I had the closing keynote at last year's event, and that shook some things up. And the organizers thought it might be good to do that maybe at the beginning of a day. So they asked me to do the opening keynote of this year's event. And when they invited me, they also asked me to give a little bit of an introduction in writing, which I did. And I want to read this to you because this sets the scene for what I'm going to talk about. Just a note of caution, some of the things that I'm going to say will be controversial, maybe for one of you, and even might create a certain gut feeling. And maybe you have that gut feeling already that in our ESG profession, not everything goes as planned and as it should on the topic of sustainability. So, what was it that I said to them? We need to talk, seriously. Over the last 2 decades, the ESG profession delivered little and incremental impact and left it at progress levels that can only be described as being less degenerative, not sustainable. The real challenge, namely defining when good is good enough, has been utterly neglected. Most likely, as it would clearly describe the level of unsustainability of an organization, of a product, of a process. The business case for sustainability, and you hear that all the time, it is all about the ROI of sustainability. The business case for sustainability was more important than the sustainability case for business. Short-term gains dominate the field. Given this low impact on climate and biodiversity, circularity, supply chains and global justice, we are now facing the collapse of our economic system. And that's not new. We know that since 1972, since the Limits to Growth report. But what did we do? We laughed about it. We ridiculed it, while it was so utterly correct. And as we know, we are in overshoot. You know the Global Overshoot Day every year and so on. So we are clearly getting a story that what we do in the sustainability and ESG profession is by far not good enough. So how to get out of these downward spirals and see collapse resilience as an opportunity? So what I'm going to do is sort of like in 2 parts. I'll first give you a rather clear picture of where we are in sustainability, and then we'll ask you to join a different route. So, but also seen the title of the conference around trust, around insight, about impact. We also need to be clear where we are on those 3 different topics. On trust. The question is then, who do we trust? How to trust? Can we trust corporations, governments, politics, big NGOs, and even parts of civil society? Can we trust global binding agreements, standards, contracts, voluntary agreements? I think if we sum it up, what we see is that we do not trust. We avoid risk. We cocoon. We retract. And we fear. When it comes to insights, what insights do we believe? Fake insights or real insights? Science and ethics-based insights, or situational and relative, and then to what goals? We see that studies are mostly single topic constructs relative to a political goal. We see that all the time. We see systemic assessments are very rare. Domino effects and downward spiraling effects are not seen in that way. We see that reports are very often not read. We know that the United Nations has done a report about people not reading their reports. And scientists' outcries, as loud as they are overheard. Ethical pleas are seen as somewhat non-binding and are like suggestions that we can miss. So, fake got normalized, science got demonized, facts are woke, and ethics is weak. And lastly, when it comes to impact, the question is, what impact? What sort of impact are we talking about? The word impact comes all the time, but what do we mean by impact? Is it financial impact? Is it sustainable impact? Is it material impacts? And there is a refusal to answer the question when good is good enough, and then for what? Are we looking at regenerative impacts instead that are necessary to achieve sustainability? I think because none of us here in the room knows when good is good enough. We're not seeing what we need to see. So enterprise value beats system value creation, and context is more of a disadvantage. And I often say companies that are on the forefront of sustainability in this economic system as it stands right now have a first mover disadvantage. And they pay a high price for that. So, last year when I was here at stage and talked about the state of the Earth, I showed 4 slides. I'm just going to repeat them here, those 4 slides, where I looked at the culmination of effects into a polycrisis. Some now call it a meta-crisis, where each and every one of them affects the others, so that we see domino effects. It's climate change, it's biodiversity loss, it's the lack of resources available for technological solutions on scale, scope, and pace as needed globally. It's a Western European pipe dream to think that we have technical solutions that will save the world. We do not have the resources for that on global scale. And an effect of that, of course, is migration, or I should better say displacement, because migration is sort of more voluntary, whereas displacement is forced. So we know that more than 1 billion people will be on the move from now until 2050, and no barbed wire will stop them. And what you see then are effects like trees and land absorbed almost no CO2 last year, that's 2024, is nature's carbon sink failing. So very clearly, in colloquial terms, we bite ourselves into the butt from both sides. Climate change on the one side that reduces the buffer carrying capacity of this planet, or as it was called by William Catton, phantom carrying capacity. And on the other side, we're killing biodiversity, which has created some of that buffer that we're using. We're overusing on both sides, and that creates a devastating effect. The carbon sink of the Amazon, of the oceans, is drastically going down because of many of these effects culminating into a domino effect. And what does it mean for all of our economies globally? Central banks now think that by 2050 GDP will decrease by more than 1/3. And if you think about how our social security systems are paid, they depend on growth. Healthcare, pension schemes, social security are nearly bankrupt systems. It's growth that they need in order to keep them alive. And growth, especially material growth, in a closed system, impossible. So, that's the situation that we're facing. And when you now look at the 2025 report from our world climate scientists, and be aware that these are very conservative people, look at their language. They say we are hurtling towards climate chaos. The planet's vital signs are flashing red. The human-driven alterations of the climate are no longer future threats, they are here now. Almost every corner of the biosphere is reeling from intensifying heat, storms, floods, droughts and fires. The window to prevent the worst outcomes is rapidly closing. And then they stress these recent developments emphasize the extreme insufficiency of global efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, and so on and so on. Once again, conservative climate scientists. This is what they tell us, and they tell us for a long time, but the story becomes more and more loud, they become more and more vocal as well. And then what you see, that all the newest studies that we have confirm those negative trends. We now have crossed 7 of 9 planetary boundaries, the carrying capacity of our planet, and make no mistake, these are not single boundaries, they are connected to each other. And part of the effect of that connectedness is these domino effects that I was describing. We know that our global food system, and that has been analyzed around the planetary boundaries as well, needs about 1/3 of the overall global footprint of these 9 planetary boundaries, very much also because of its dependency on fossil fuels. Our food system is very dependent on fossil fuels in all parts of its value chain. And we have reached, of course, 1.5 degrees, and we will even go higher. We are on the track to a 2.7 degrees world, even with the national declared climate targets that we have seen. And we see that we are reaching first tipping points. And the first one is coral reefs facing a widespread dieback. And the effect of the dieback of coral reefs has again knock-on effects on ocean acidification and many other things. So you see how all of these things are coming closer and closer to a sort of end game for us as humanity. And then we face that utter absurdity of the current situation. The European Parliament is adopting the CSRD and the CSDDD as a statement of nothingness. Because that's what the simplification means. It's not simplification, it's deregulation. It is even worse. 92 to 94% of all companies that were supposed to talk about or to publish about sustainability are now exempted, more or less. Absolutely opposite case. And then the omnibus, the so-called omnibus, that will go down in history as a very, very bad idea. The Parliament accesses climate transition plans in a seismic vote, because this vote was from the European Conservative Party together with right-wing European-hating extremists in the European Parliament. They formed a coalition, and a so-called firewall that was there has been broken down. And that will only be the first of many of these omnibuses. There are 5 or 6 more in the planning with same effects. And the utter absurdity of this is that the Green New Deal from the European Parliament was once created to be a competitive edge of Europe. And it's now torn down to increase the competitiveness of Europe. How utterly absurd is this? And so many are saying, once a global leader on climate action, the EU has given into the right's green bashing and shooting ourselves into the foot. And when you read what the European Parliament rapporteur, Jürgen Warborn, was writing, the omnibus is the single biggest reporting cost-cutting legislative proposal in EU history. According to the Commission, it saves businesses 4.7 billion euros yearly, and with the changes adopted today by the Parliament, the savings will be even higher. Yes, we save money, but it will cost lives, many lives. And not only in Europe, around the world. US attorney generals are forbidding companies in the US to follow the European law. They call this unlawful. The global north countries are fueling fire since the Paris Agreement. Since 2015, the European countries have increased their fossil fuel by 40%. So how can this be part of the solution? And then finally, even people like Bill Gates are talking bullshit so that Donald Trump can say we won the war on climate change. So, utterly absurd. We're moving absolutely in the wrong direction. So I'm asking all of us, what is it that we can still believe in? And I can only give you a list of the things that I don't believe in anymore. I believe that our economic system collapse, or something that an economic system collapse can still be avoided. I don't think so. I think we're way far too much down in our collapse. Because the system eats itself. And there's a lot of literature around that. Read End Times by Peter Turchin, Goliath's Curse by Luke Kemp, Breaking Together by Jem Bendell, How Everything Can Collapse by Pablo Sevilla, Slow Down Now Die by Timothy Parikh, or Hospicing Modernity by Vanessa Andreotti. I also do not believe that in the current economic system, the organizational form of a large company can ever be sustainable. It is a pure impossibility. It does not work in this economic system. And that leads to the fact that companies who are mainly sociopathic constructs will give in. And that's what we see. They retract their plans. They even are now getting in touch with the right-wing extremists because they think if it buys us business, it's all good for us. I also don't believe, and I'm interested in Robert Habeck's views later on today, that politics is still able to be useful in a poly-crisis without causing damage elsewhere. And now we see nationalism, we see right-wing radicalism, power over tactics, leading to social violence, cocooning, and egocentrism. I also don't believe that large NGOs can still have a global steering effect beyond unheard warnings. Many of them are long co-opted by larger companies. So it's pure symbolism that I see from them. And at global conferences like COPs, we've seen this just last week again in Belém, still have a chance of success. They are obstructed by nation states and also companies like the fossil fuel industry. And that philanthropy can contribute to system solution. They just put plasters on open wounds. It's very incremental approaches that you see. So, and that enterprise value-based standards, now coming to reporting, can work in a collapse scenario. They are funded by all these other players. Their funding will implode as soon as collapse continues. So, if that is the situation, the question then is, what if we look for a third way? How can we get out of these downward spirals and see collapse resilience maybe as an opportunity? Let's talk about regeneration and bioregionalism. And just as a quick reminder, this was also a slide that was in there last year. If you want to describe sustainability in a very easy way, just do it through an indicator. Use the sustainability quotient, because that clearly defines what sustainability is. It's actual impacts over normative impacts, with a numeration and a denomination. And to be very clear, everything that happens today in ESG is just happening on the numerator. It is ESG performance for enterprise value creation. What is lacking is the other part of the homework that we expected the standard setters to do, but they denied that responsibility. And that is to work with so-called thresholds and allocations to get to system value creation. And thresholds is nothing else than the outer and the inner side of the donut, the carrying capacities of our planet and the carrying capacities on the social side, the way we behave. But that's the biggest problem. Everything happens in ESG happens here on the numeration side. And because of the lack of this, what do? We compare performance of this year with the performance of last year, or the performance of the last 3 years, or the performance of an industry average. What does it say about sustainability? Utterly nothing. I don't know. This is information I can't deal with. I don't know. Because the question that this indicator asks is, when is good good enough to be called a sustainable performance? I'm saying this because this also comes up in work that we've done, which we call the Authentic Sustainability Assessment, work that we've done together with the UNRIS, the UN Research Institute for Social Development. We also offer trainings around that on a quarterly basis. And what we do is that we give you all these denominators, so that every organization can actually take their performance and measure it against an allocation that is based on these science-based or ethics-based thresholds. Then this thing becomes a message. But, and that's what I also said, it also will describe your level of unsustainability. And maybe it's time to be transparent about that. There is no sustainable company in an unsustainable world. or non-sustainable economic system. It's purely impossible. The system will fight it. So, if I say what I don't believe in, what is it that I do believe in? And I call that acts of midwifing. And the things that I don't believe in anymore, I call it acts of hospicing. So we're in this age where we need to hospice and let go of a lot of things and need to midwife and create others. I do believe in bioregionalism as an alternative concept. And why? Because it has been the source code of humanity for the last 400,000 years already. It got just bulldozed by colonialism, by industrialization, by globalization. We have always lived in bioregions, and we have always lived in balance with our bioregion in the past. But now we think that we need to ship things from the other part of the world in stinking tankers just for our benefit. So what we need to do is a recollection, a recalibration, also a remembering also of a lot of indigenous wisdom. There's so much richness in indigenous wisdom. We work with a lot of indigenous leaders. I'm utterly stunned how much we can learn about that. So I love the word remembering because it means coming together again. Remember. And that is what we need to do. Much more than that. And Ilya Prigogine, who is a Nobel laureate, has said, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence have the capacity to shift the entire system. And that is the focus of our work, to create as many islands of coherence in bioregions as possible, so that we have these positive tipping points through bioregionalism. And if you think, oh, I've never heard of it, bioregionalism is existing already now. It's existing everywhere. There are hundreds of bioregional learning centers globally. They just need to become more visible. They need to weave in the bioregion and between bioregions. And the interaction in and between bioregions needs to become more visible. And that is where our work is also on creating so-called knowledge commons and new aspects of so-called self-governance. Thresholds, allocation, multiple capitals, that's what I showed you in the indicator slide. They will still be essential for measuring the success, not so much of an organization, but of a bioregion. So we are getting into a sphere where the unit of measurement is changing from the corporation to the bioregion. And of course, within the bioregion, there are also corporations, or they have certain sites in there. So they need to take their part. But declaring that context is king. Only then we know when a bioregion will be successful. We need an infrastructure supported by many local communities to measure that success on so-called commons infrastructure. So the focus here, and for all of the IT nerds and people here also in the room who deal with systems, data and interpretation resilience is necessary, and no manipulation should be possible. And regarding any standard, just as important as compliance with fundamental authentic sustainability measurement, which I explained, is its governance and participation of bioregional actors as a target group. Success measurement of the right unit of measurement. That's, for example, one of the things in the ESRS. There was hardly any civil society involved. We had a lot of young apparatchiks from global corporates in these working groups. And we see the result that we get. So the realization, I think, for all of you is ESG is still necessary, but it's not sufficient. It will only develop new strengths when applied in the bioregional context of steering success and sociocratic dialogues for well-being. And that is the idea that I also want to leave behind here. Think about what you're doing today and think about the richness of your ideas in this new bioregional and regenerative context. So I want to offer 6 steps for you to think about today. Acquaint yourselves with the basics of bioregionalism and its logic, how nature works. There are great books and websites to delve deeper, including our own website, that has an extra tab as well, and we have devoted our 2025 conference fully to it. The videos are all available, all the slide decks, it's all available free of charge for anyone. You don't even have to leave an email address behind. No fencing at all for that global common good knowledge. Second step, free yourselves from the handcuffs of standards. Assess the bioregional capacity, its benefits and burdens of your company or site within a given bioregional context. Don't forget supply chain effects on or from other bioregions. Embrace the UNSDPI, that sort of measurement that I just noted. And take a training course if you want. They are available from us. Accept your level of unsustainability. Don't say, oh, we've become a bit more sustainable. That's bullshit. There is no a bit more sustainable. It's either less degenerative or regenerative. And when you cross the line from one to the other, that's where sustainability begins. And don't be afraid. You're in good companionship. There are no sustainable companies on this planet. Link yourself with bioregional groups or a nearby bioregional learning center. Collaborate, assess and support. But more importantly, decide on things you need to let go of in this new logic. Understandably difficult. And advise your organization accordingly. Teach internally, speak externally. And if your organization is unwilling to cope, I've done this 3 times in my life, break out to break through. They will have a tough time anyway as collapse kicks in more harshly. And the last point, mourn. This was a process of up to 3 years for me. Then make your real inner peace, build resilience against those that refuse to walk the path with you, take others with you that are willing to acknowledge system collapse and are willing to learn about collapse resilience. It will be an energizing path to follow. And here's an example of one of those organizations. I've mentioned it, Patagonia. Their newest report on the first page starts with, nothing we do is sustainable. And then they go through all the different things that they do to become regenerative, with all the difficulty that means. So I'll leave you with this. I'll have a breakout session today where I will deepen our knowledge on regeneration and thriving at 12:15 at the Salon Drachenfels. We will deepen the solution side of things. So what can you take away with you? This is my last slide. What can you take away from this keynote for you personally? Accept that we need to go from collapse awareness to collapse acknowledgement. Like I said, it's a morning journey. You are walking away from, you're hospicing certain ideas, stereotypes. You're walking towards, or midwifing, new essential moves. Active hope and collapse resilience, expressed through bioregionalism, is a healing activity. Regeneration is not the next thing. It was always needed to achieve sustainability, and it was always there, but just not visible. Context is king. Do you know when good is good enough? And if not, what's the necessary to get there? You need a new compass to arise. Assess if solutions by others, that you're also going to hear about, achieve that goal. And if not, engage with them to clarify the shortages. Are they open to progress towards what's needed? Be very critical with regard to Northern Western Hemisphere tech fixes. A lot presented in this area is allegedly continued colonialism under the name of sustainability. Scale, scope, and pace needed won't often stand the test of time. Degrowth is potentially unavoidable. Engage both professionally and privately. It does start all with yourself. None of us are victims, we're all influencers. And finally, Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can set the first stone actually today. So that's what I wanted to talk about with you today. If you want to read more about my stuff, I have a so-called Sunday Thought every Sunday morning on LinkedIn. I have a Lighthouse Keeper newsletter, and I have also written a book called The Corona Chronicles. It's sold out, but we still have a couple of printed copies here. So if anybody of you is willing to have a copy or have a look into the book and you're potentially willing to buy a copy, my wife Alexandra is here and I am here. So the book is available for you to look at, and also if you want, have a copy. I hope this shook things up a little bit and gave you food for thought for today. So thank you very much and have a great day, and hopefully I see some of you again in the breakout session. Thank you.